What if I told you that Lewis Hamilton himself could be driving an insecure car every weekend without knowing it? What would you think if the 7-time world champion reveals live that his Ferrari does not feel good? And it is not just due to lack of rhythm. What Hamilton discovered in Hungary could be more serious than anyone imagined. Hungary Friday was not only another day of practices. It was the confirmation of a suspicion that was dragged from the first test in Mugello. Hamilton does not have a competitive car in his hands. He has something worse, a car that does not allow him to trust his own track decisions. At that time, all the foci stopped aiming at the results and began to turn to engineers, designers, those responsible for the SF25. What failed in Maranello? What did they omit? And why, in the car of a 7-time world champion, nobody saw it coming? In the garage, the engineers began to review the data, and what they found did not have a clear cause. The behavior delta between curve and curve was excessive. The car won or lost adherence unpredictably, as if there were two Ferrari SF25 running simultaneously and changing from one moment to another. Not even setup changes between Free 1 and Free 2 managed to stabilize that instability. In fact, Hamilton tried two completely different approaches between both sessions. None worked. The second act in this technical and sports story begins when Friday's analysis not only confirms Hamilton's fears, but also uncovers what seems to be a chain of design errors in the SF25. What until now were isolated symptoms begin to fit as pieces of a worrying puzzle. One that doubts not only the performance of the car, but the complete direction of the Ferrari project by 2025. The first major alarm comes from the general slope of the car. In modern Formula One, the balance between the front and rear axes is not just a matter of comfort for the pilot. It is the starting point for the entire performance architecture. If the car does not transmit security, the pilot cannot attack. And that is exactly what Hamilton denounced. SF25 is unpredictable, not in a curve or in a batch, but return after return in different sectors of the same circuit. It is an incoherent behavior where the car reacts completely differently from equal inputs of the pilot. That is, Hamilton slows down and turns at a point equal to the previous return, and the car responds with subviring or overwhelming or a sharp change of support. This inconsistency is the worst enemy of trust. And when the pilot cannot foresee how the car is going to behave, the margin of error becomes invisible. The team tried to mitigate this with configuration changes between the sessions. Settings in the rigidity of the suspension, differences in aerodynamic loads, including different programs of differential and motor mapping. Nothing worked. And when a series of so wide configurations does not solve the feeling of lack of control, that indicates that the problem is in the fundamental architecture of the chassis or in its interaction with electronic control systems. But the true critical point, which caused panic views in the Ferrari box, was the behavior of the Brembo brake system. Hamilton did not keep anything. He called it directly a lottery. And in a sport where 330 km per hour at 90 km per hour in just 40 meters, talking about unpredictable brakes is like saying that the parachute may or may not open in each attempt. The engineers discovered that not all albums or pills responded the same. Some warmed more, others less. The pedal pressure was inconstant. What was previously a clean braking suddenly became a sudden block or a critical delay in the answer. In Spa-Francorchamps, weeks before, this situation had already caused a larger scare. A high-speed spin caused by new specification brakes that Hamilton had not been able to try before the weekend. And in Hungary, Ferrari remembered those components with the hope of finding solutions. But all they found was a repetition of the disaster. The third major component of the structural problem of SF25 is the assisted direction. From the preseason tests, Hamilton was visibly uncomfortable with the steering wheel feedback. He described it as heavy, lacking precision, and resistant to rapid curves. In Formula One, the address not only serves to turn. It is a communication system between the track and the pilot. A good direction transmits, anticipates, allows you to interpret the boundaries of the grip. A bad direction, on the other hand, silence to the car. Ferrari has tried to modify the hydraulic assistance of the system, but the technicians warn that once the physical mechanism and its calibration are defined, modifying it in the middle of the season is almost impossible. It is not software. It is a hardware limitation. And that leaves Hamilton trapped with a steering wheel that fights him every time he takes a high-speed curve. Charles Leclerc has also reported the same problem, but to a lesser extent. And that reinforces a hypothesis, that Hamilton's driving style is directly in conflict with the technical characteristics of this Ferrari. Finally, there is the rear suspension, which was one of the most anticipated elements of the year. Ferrari introduced an evolution in SPA, designed to allow the car to be smaller and win aerodynamic load without sacrificing traction. In theory, an improvement. In practice, another source of instability. Hamilton described how the car became too aggressive in the transfer of weight when braking and accelerating. That is, not only the front axle was erratic, but the rear axle also reacted unpredictably. This is critical because when the car loses coherence between the two axes, it stops behaving as a whole and becomes two halves that fight with each other. When Hamilton says, "I don't trust the car," he is not pointing out a bad day or a failed tuning. He is pointing out a complete misalignment between what he needs and what Ferrari is giving him. And that is the truly alarming. Because if Hamilton, one of the most adaptable pilots, technicians, and grid retailers, cannot take performance from the SF25, who can? Charles Leclerc has shown moments of brilliance, yes, but even he has reported similar failures. And although their driving style can hide some deficiencies, it does not eliminate them, only delay them. This situation raises a dilemma in Maranello. The 2025 car has been conceived with a design philosophy that is now being questioned. Each Grand Prix that passes without a real solution is lost time, not only for the fight for the championship, but for the development of the car next year. And this is where the bomb begins to mark the seconds. If Ferrari does not find answers soon, not only compromises the current season, he compromises his immediate technical future. The pressure inside the equipment is huge. The engineers are divided between looking for quick solutions and restructuring the base concept of the car, which is virtually impossible without compromising planned updates. Frédéric Vasseur, team leader, faces a colossal challenge: maintain the morale of two elite pilots while dealing with a project that wobbles from its foundations. Because what is at stake is not just one more season for Ferrari. It is its credibility as a real contender. After a promising campaign in 2024, where they positioned themselves as the only team capable of challenging McLaren after the fall of Red Bull, 2025 seemed the year to consolidate. But the SF25 has betrayed those expectations. And he has done it in the worst possible way, with empty promises and structural defects. For Hamilton, the situation becomes a kind of career against time. You need results, you need confidence, and above all, you need guarantees that you are in a team that can evolve. His arrival to Ferrari was not a whim, nor a marketing operation. It was a strategic bet to close his career with another world title. But right now, it seems that he is fighting more for mechanical stability than by victories. And this inevitably opens another question. How much more time Hamilton will tolerate this situation before demanding deep changes? Either in the technical team, in decision management, or even in its immediate environment within the team. Because if there is something that Hamilton has demonstrated throughout his career, is that he does not stay with crossed arms when the performance is not up to his ambition. Rumors already begin to emerge in the paddock. Will Hamilton seek directly influence the development of the car for the second stretch of the year? Could your relationship with Leclerc be affected if Ferrari begins to prioritize Monegasco by pure adaptability? And what will happen if the team fails to solve the defects before the next key quotes in Zandvoort or Monza? Hungary has marked a turning point, a moment in which promises face reality. And that reality is that Ferrari has a very serious problem in hands. One that can no longer be hidden with optimistic statements or with small configuration settings. The SF25 is in trial, and the final verdict will depend on what happens in the coming weeks. Thus we end this tour of one of the most disturbing episodes of the 2025 season. What happened in Hungary is not a simple technical anecdote. It is a symptom of something much deeper. A silent fracture that threatens to convert the Ferrari SF25 into a case study of how a car may fail not due to lack of power, or due to talent, but by structural decisions that do not resist the passage of time or the demand of the track. And this is where the story becomes uncomfortable for Ferrari. Because we are not talking about a half-grill car. We are talking about Lewis Hamilton's car. Of one of the most successful and demanding pilots in history. A man who has not come to Maranello to walk his legacy, but to conquer an 8th world crown. And that goal today looks more and more distant. The question is no longer whether Hamilton can adapt to SF25. Because he has done everything possible to achieve it. He has changed his braking style, his way of entry into curve, his communication with engineers. The question now is if Ferrari can adapt to Hamilton. If the team is prepared to deliver a car at the height of its ambition. And if it is not, what consequences could that have for the rest of the championship? In a sport where the tenths of the second are paid with millions, and where the confidence in the car is the ingredient that makes the difference between glory and abandonment, Ferrari cannot afford to continue ignoring the obvious. He has a powerful weapon in his hands, but also unstable. And if they fail to stabilize it in time, which today is an opportunity, will become a burden impossible to sustain. What would you do if you were part of Ferrari's technical team? Where do you think the real problem is? In the assisted direction, in the chassis, in the internal culture of the team? Can Hamilton reverse this situation from the inside, or are we seeing the first signs of a deeper rupture? Leave me your analysis in the comments.